Family ties break hard, but some betrayals deserve a public ending. My name is Marcus, and 3 years ago, I learned that trust is the most fragile thing in the world. I'd been married to Sarah for 8 years, together for 10. We had what I thought was a solid marriage, not perfect, but real. We laughed together, fought occasionally, like normal couples, and had built a life I was proud of. I worked in construction management. She was a nurse. And we just bought our first house with a white picket fence and everything. My younger brother Jake was always the charmer of the family. 4 years younger than me, he had this easy smile and smooth way of talking that made everyone love him instantly. I was proud of him too. Proud when he graduated college, proud when he got his marketing job, proud when he started dating seriously. We'd grown up close, and even as adults, we talked almost daily. He was my best man at my wedding. Sarah was practically his sister-in-law in every sense. The first sign something was wrong came in February. Sarah started working late more often, picking up extra shifts, she claimed. She'd come home exhausted, sometimes not even wanting to talk about her day. I figured nursing was stressful. Healthcare workers were burning out everywhere. I tried to be supportive, took over more of the household duties, even surprised her with spa days to help her relax. Then I noticed her phone habits changing. She'd take it to the bathroom, keep it face down during dinner, and practically sleep with it under her pillow. When I joked about it, she got defensive, talking about patient privacy and work emergencies. It sounded reasonable enough that I pushed my suspicions aside. Jake started acting different too. He'd always been the type to drop by unannounced, but suddenly he was finding excuses not to come around when I was home. He'd visit Sarah during the day when I was at work sites, claiming he was in the neighborhood. Sarah mentioned these visits casually, like they were perfectly normal. And maybe they were. Maybe I was just getting paranoid. The discovery came in March, completely by accident. Sarah had left her laptop open on our kitchen table while she showered. A message notification popped up in the corner, from Jake. I wasn't trying to snoop, but the preview was right there. Can't wait to feel your lips again. My world stopped. I stared at that message for what felt like hours, but was probably seconds. My hands shook as I clicked on their conversation thread. What I found destroyed everything I thought I knew about my life. Months of messages between my wife and my brother. Intimate details about their relationship. Complaints about me. Plans for secret meetups and discussions about how to keep their affair hidden. They'd been seeing each other since November. 4 months of lies. 4 months of me being the fool who brought them coffee and asked about their days. The messages revealed they'd been intimate in my own house, in my own bed, while I was working 60-hour weeks to pay for our new mortgage. They talked about me like I was an obstacle, something inconvenient they had to work around. The betrayal was complete. It wasn't just my wife cheating. It was my brother, my closest friend, the person I trust with my life. They'd both looked me in the eye for months, shared meals with me, laughed at my jokes, while conducting this elaborate deception behind my back. I printed everything. Every message, every photo they'd exchanged, every cruel comment about how clueless I was. I sat in my kitchen until Sarah got out of the shower, and when she walked in wearing her bathrobe, humming some song, I simply slid the printed messages across the table. The color drained from her face. She tried to explain, to minimize, to blame our marriage problems I didn't even know we had. She cried, she begged, she promised it meant nothing. But the evidence was right there in black and white. Months of I love yous and planning their future together. I called Jake that same night. When he heard my voice, he knew immediately why I was calling. He broke down, apologizing, claiming it just happened, that they never meant for it to go so far. He wanted to come over and talk it through like men. I told him if he set foot on my property, I'd have him arrested for trespassing. Sarah moved out the next week, staying with her sister while we figured out the divorce. Jake kept calling, texting, even showing up at my job sites trying to apologize. I blocked his number and made it clear to my coworkers that he wasn't welcome. But I knew this wasn't over. Our family was tight-knit, and the annual Thompson family reunion was coming up in June. This reunion was tradition, something our grandmother started 40 years ago. Every June, all the Thompsons gathered at my uncle's lake house for a long weekend. 3 generations, about 30 people total, sharing stories, catching up, and looking at photo slideshows of the past year. My grandmother, now 82, looked forward to it more than Christmas. It was sacred family time. I almost didn't go. The thought of seeing Jake, of pretending everything was normal for the sake of family harmony, made me sick. But then I realized something. This was my opportunity. If Jake and Sarah thought they could destroy my life and just move on, they were wrong. They'd humiliated me in private, but truth has a way of demanding public acknowledgement. I spent 2 months preparing. I collected every piece of evidence of their affair, the printed messages, photos they'd taken together, even security footage from my home camera that showed Jake's car in my driveway during work hours. I compiled it all into a presentation, something that looked professional and thorough. The week before the reunion, I called my grandmother. I told her I was putting together a special surprise slideshow this year, something to honor family relationships and the importance of trust and loyalty. She was delighted, said it sounded wonderful. I asked her to make sure everyone would be there for the presentation Saturday evening. The reunion started Friday evening. Jake was there with some new girlfriend he'd apparently started dating after Sarah and I separated. Sarah wasn't invited. She'd never been blood family, but Jake's presence was enough to make my jaw clench. He tried to approach me several times, but I managed to avoid any real conversation. My family knew about my divorce, but they didn't know the details. They assumed it was the usual marriage problems, irreconcilable differences, growing apart. Jake had told them we were both going through a rough patch, but would work things out eventually. Some of my relatives even made comments about how nice it would be when Sarah and I got back together. Saturday evening came. After dinner, everyone gathered in the main living room for what they thought would be the usual family slideshow, photos from the past year, graduations, new babies, vacation pictures. My grandmother sat in her favorite chair, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. The mood was warm and nostalgic. I connected my laptop to the TV and began with normal family photos. Pictures from birthdays, holidays, my cousin's wedding. Everyone was smiling, making comments about how time flies and how good everyone looked. Then I transitioned to what I called a special section about family values. The first slide was a quote about trust and loyalty in families. Everyone nodded approvingly. The second slide was about betrayal and its consequences. The mood shifted slightly. People looked confused, but still attentive. The third slide was titled, "When Family Members Betray Each Other," and featured a photo of Jake and Sarah kissing in my kitchen. The room went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. My grandmother's hand went to her chest. My parents looked like they'd been slapped. Jake went white as a sheet and stood up, shouting my name, but I kept going. Slide after slide of evidence. Their text messages displayed on the big screen for everyone to read. Photos they'd taken together in my bed. Screenshots of conversations where they mocked me and planned their secret meetings. I'd organized it chronologically, showing how the affair progressed over months while they maintained the pretense of caring about me. Jake tried to rush the laptop, but my older cousins held him back. He was screaming about privacy and how I had no right, but his protests only made him look more guilty. The evidence spoke for itself. My grandmother started crying. Not just tears, but deep, heartbroken sobs. She kept saying she couldn't believe it, that this wasn't how she raised her grandsons. My mother was furious, not at me, but at Jake. She stood up and told him to get out of her sight. My father just sat there, shaking his head, looking older than I'd ever seen him. The presentation lasted 20 minutes. 20 minutes of complete silence, except for Jake's increasingly desperate attempts to explain or apologize. When it ended, the family exploded into arguments. Some relatives thought I'd gone too far, airing private business at a family gathering. Others were furious at Jake for his betrayal. My grandmother had to be helped to her room. Jake left that night with his girlfriend, who looked mortified by the whole situation. He didn't say goodbye to anyone. Several family members followed him out, not to comfort him, but to make sure he actually left. My uncle told him he wasn't welcome back at the lake house. The reunion ended early Sunday morning, instead of the planned Sunday evening. The family was split down the middle, those who supported my right to expose the truth, and those who thought I'd destroyed family unity for revenge. My parents stood by me, as did most of my cousins, but some of my aunts and uncles felt I'd handled it wrong. I didn't care. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The secret was out. Everyone knew what Jake and Sarah had done. There was no more pretending, no more whispered conversations about why my marriage failed. The truth was public, and it was ugly, but it was real. My divorce finalized 6 months later. Sarah tried to reconcile once more, claiming Jake had manipulated her, but I was done. The trust was broken beyond repair. She moved across the country to start fresh somewhere new. The family slowly began to heal, but it was never the same. Holiday gatherings were smaller, more careful. People walked on eggshells around topics of marriage and loyalty. My grandmother never fully recovered from the shock. She died 2 years later, and Jake wasn't invited to the funeral. But here's the thing that still gets to me. Every year on the anniversary of that reunion, Jake calls me. Not on my birthday, not on holidays, but on that specific date. He's called 3 times now. He doesn't try to make excuses anymore or claim he was young and stupid. He just apologizes, says he knows what he did was unforgivable, and asks if there's any chance we could ever be brothers again. I listen to his voicemails but never call back. Part of me understands that people make mistakes, that family should forgive. But another part of me remembers sitting in my kitchen reading those messages, feeling like the biggest fool who ever lived. Some betrayals cut too deep for forgiveness. My life moved on. I'm seeing someone new now, someone who doesn't know Jake exists. I learned to trust again, slowly and carefully. I rebuilt relationships with the family members who stood by me. But I never forgot the lesson that reunion taught everyone who was there. Blood may be thicker than water, but betrayal cuts through both. And sometimes the only justice is making sure everyone knows exactly who they're dealing with. Jake learned that night that actions have consequences, and some consequences are public, permanent, and painful. He still calls every year. I still don't answer. And honestly, I don't think I ever will.